today at the Sustainable Nutrition Platform, we host our great friend, Felipe Carazo, who is the head of public sector engagement at the Tropical Forest Alliance at the World Economic Forum. Felipe is really driven by commitment and passion, and I want to thank him for being here with us. Hello, everybody. This is Pietro Paganini at the Sustainable Nutrition Platform. Welcome back to our podcast series. And today, I'm very proud and delighted that we have a good friend of us, that is Felipe Carazo from the Tropical Forest Alliance. Hello, Felipe, and welcome here with us.
Hello, Pietro, and hello to everyone that's looking forward to this conversation. My name is Felipe Carazo. I'm the head of public sector engagement for the Tropical Forest Alliance based at the World Economic Forum. And very thankful with you, Pietro, and with Competere that always provide these spaces for reflections, insights, collective thinking. And but I think that underlying all of that, there's this value of connecting as people, right? All across
Indeed.
the globe and trying to push for the common good, I would say.
Indeed. And I mentioned Tropical Forest Alliance, and you added at the World Economic Forum, and you're dealing with forest and deforestation. Let me give you just a couple of information. Deforestation is a critical issue that has significant implications for our planet. It refers to the clearing of forests or trees, primarily due to the human activities such as agriculture, logging, and urbanization. Deforestation has numerous adverse effects on our environment, including soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, climate change, and water pollution. However, it also has implications for nutrition as it affects the availability and quality of food. Deforestation can lead to a reduction in the production of fruits, vegetables, and other crops, which can ultimately impact human health. Therefore, it's essential to understand the relationship between deforestation and nutrition to address the critical issues. According to the most recent data available, the world lost 4.7 million hectares of forest per year between 2010 and 2020, resulting in a net loss of 47 million hectares of forest. The tropics, and here we come to the Tropical Forest Alliance, lost 11.1 million hectares of tree cover in 2021, with tropical primary rainforests being of particular concern due to their importance in carbon storage and biodiversity. Forest fires, agricultural extension, and logging are the main causes of deforestation, and boreal forests in Russia also experienced unprecedented tree cover loss in 2021 due to fires. However, and here's the good news, there are some good news in Indonesia that has reduced primary forest loss for the 5th straight year, indicating that corporate commitments and government action can help address this issue. Now, after this very brief introduction, Felipe, what is the Tropical Forest Alliance, and how are you and can it help fighting against deforestation? What exactly are you doing?
Thank you, Pietro. Yes, the Tropical Forest Alliance, as its name says, it's a group of stakeholders that are trying to contribute to this common cause. But why that alliance was put together becomes different element. The agenda of tackling deforestation is not a new agenda. It's the pressing issue, but we've been dealing with this for many years. We know the implications, but probably we were not aware of the implications all across the board of the stakeholders that had to do with it. I think that if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, action was very much government driven. Then the 19th and the 20s saw a higher level of civil society awareness transform itself into the spur of NGOs, non-government organizations, to try to speed up the fight for these issues, the environmental and social issues, and deforestation being at the core. But in this, the latest 2 decades, we see more private stakeholders dimensioning that the issue becomes relevant, and I would say it's not just because of a lot of love and passion to the forest, like the ones in my photograph behind, but because we've started to understand that forests provide services and goods that are really essential for economic and social development, and that they become the base of productive chains, and tackling deforestation becomes a soft commodity security strategy, right?
But one question I have, since it's also on your background, and we are in a podcast, so most people cannot see your background. It's actually a beautiful forest that you have, a beautiful picture of the forest, I guess, in Central America, where you are based right now. But you have the logo of the World Economic Forum, and the Tropical Forest Alliance is part of the World Economic Forum. That is a beautiful forum, beautiful discussion, and very relevant about the world economics. But it also been accused of representing the 1%, the famous 1% of people with the means of production. Isn't that a contradiction that you are within that forum? And which is the message that the forum wants to provide to the rest of us?
Yes, the forum is we should see it as a tool. The World Economic Forum for Humanity should represent a tool that can allow us cost effectively to mobilize corporate leadership. Of course, how do we go about this becomes a challenge. I think the forum has an enormous convening power. And if we are able to tap into that convening power to address issues, complex issues such as deforestation, then we might be in a position to contribute to the situation, especially when, as I was mentioning, you have corporate stakeholders that see deforestation as a risk, right? So as those companies see deforestation as a risk for their supply chain security, I think that the forum has to take risks and has to. One of those risks is being tagged as a greenwashing entity. Well, it depends on how we can really walk the talk, and how can we go from the convening to the impact, to the action. And I think that by mobilizing corporate leadership into the solution, especially when we're talking about soft commodity supply chains, which are heavily corporate driven, then we might be in a position of tapping into a win-win situation that could be good not only for business, for trade, but also for sustainability and all the inherent values that come along with the forest resources for communities.
But are these policies that you're referring to, and is your contribution in a way bringing some results? Because we hear that deforestation in some parts of the world is slowing down. I mentioned earlier Indonesia. In some other parts is actually increasing. Are the policies working? And what kind of other policies we need? And the question is just a matter of policies, or is it also a matter of individual or political commitment?
Yes, if we go back to the drawing board and we check the numbers, we're going to say that we're not there yet, right? The deforestation rates are alarming, but that's a common problem. Now, if we go into the details of what's the infrastructure, the capacity that's being built, in a way, if I can use those terms to address the issue, I think there's been progress. And I think that in the context of the Tropical Forest Alliance and the platform that the World Economic Forum represents, we started on this, to address this challenge by mobilizing private stakeholders who wanted to clean out their own supply chains and set up a series of commitments. But as we went through the process, we learned that the amount of variables, of elements that are needed to do this, because of the complexity of these supply chains, it requires a lot of collective action. So just to mobilize the private stakeholders to the table and to push for this agenda, in which I would say it's let's push for ambition, but at the same time pragmatic conditions for this to happen, I think has sparked a lot of processes, has even included or led to a more detailed level of engagement of the consumer, which puts pressure on the companies themselves, but also puts pressure on governments, and is leading now to a big change on the scenario, which is that we're mobilizing from what I would say are voluntary demand-side measures towards mandatory demand-side measures. That puts a new dynamic that hopefully could lead us into a win-win situation to tackle the issue of deforestation, where every party.
You mentioned, Felipe, gratefully that there are mandatory actions, particularly government action, and here we have to come to what I think is a breakthrough by the European Union, particularly the Commission and the Parliament and the Council, that passed a regulation that imposes to 8 commodities to be imported with zero deforestation. So these commodities have to prove once they pass the European borders that they have caused no deforestation. And there is a commitment or compliance for full traceability. Is that the right step towards zero deforestation? And can it be copied or replicated by other countries?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's the right step or not. Time will tell. What I can tell you is that that's the disruptive step. And probably having disruption in the system is the only way we can really see if change can happen. I think that the EU, the European Union, it's trying to walk the talk. And I'm saying the talk goes around the broader set of commitments that not only the EU, but almost every country in the planet have set up with regards to the climate change agenda and the biodiversity agenda. The idea of signing out agreements such as the Paris Agreement or the Global Biodiversity Framework is not to take a photograph. It's to really take action. So within that context, the EU is really moving forward within what they think is necessary for them to contribute to those commitments. Now, the issue is more complex, especially when we're talking about trade flows. And I think the EU is aware of that complexity, and that's why they want to go the extra yard and try to tackle the issue of deforestation through a sustainability approach that does not differentiate between legal or illegal deforestation. Basically, there's a problem, we have to contribute to that. But it really requires the forging of partnerships so that we can really go beyond not importing deforestation to the EU, but rather using the EU push to tackle deforestation at source.
And when you exactly talk about partnership, because as we know, trade, unfortunately, is like a war. It's done by at least two parties. So in this case, you have the European Union that is importing and demanding zero deforestation. On the other side, you have the exporters or producing countries. The question is, because I read and heard about a lot of concerns, are the producing and exporting countries ready to comply with this zero deforestation regulation? And beside the partnership, what do they need that the European Union can give them?
Yes, when we talk about partnership, there's a saying that in Latin America, it's you need two to tango, right?
Exactly.
You can't build partnerships if the two parties don't get to the table. And I think that for the upstream countries, the producer countries, which, by the way, some of those producer countries within the regulation can even be European countries, right? Because of the way the commodities flows occurs. But for producer countries, there's going to be a lot of challenges to address what this regulation requires and demands. The push for geolocation and for risk assessment becomes a new space. But I think that the biggest challenge is not even that. I think the biggest challenge is for the producer countries to be aware that they can really bring to the table instruments, experiences, elements that they've worked on in such a way that this could lead to that producer and consumer constructive dynamic that finds the key moving forward. If producer countries think that this is just about compliance with the regulation, we might fall short, and we might even end up with a tilted dynamic. But if producer countries tap into their own richness, and they can bring that to the table, and consumer countries have the openness to understand those tools as way of cost effectively addressing the issue that the market demands, such as the regulations that you just mentioned on the EU, are trying to address, then we might be into a good situation. Of course, taking time to talk and to look for points of agreement requires effort and time, but that's probably a cost-effective strategy in the long term. We might have to go through a lot of adjustment in the short term, but if it's done well, maybe we have the conditions to tackle issue beyond. So let's think about the partnership as a way of having a balancing act on how to tackle an issue that's linked to deforestation, which at the end, it's of paramount importance for all the countries, would be producer or consumer, as reflected in these global agreements.
Now, let's go back, since we're turning to the end, with Felipe Carazo here at our podcast on sustainable nutrition. You mentioned the World Economic Forum, the great commitment, but I want to go back a few weeks in time when the World Economic Forum took place. Obviously, on top of the agenda, there were many other issues: climate change, the war in Ukraine, the crisis of the supply chain, or the shortage of commodities. Now probably we'll also have the bank system crisis in the United States. Can deforestation be part and be on top of this agenda? And honestly, were you guys able to put this on top of the agenda, or all these big CEOs and presidents and government officials were just saying, okay, we have other priorities. Yes, we take care of forests and deforestation, but we have other priorities? Or you feel that really there was a commitment?
I think there's really a commitment. We just, as human beings, we like to put things into different planes, different spaces, and I think the commitment exists there, but we haven't understood the interlinkage of the agendas. So when I look at the deforestation challenge, if you ask me which is the biggest obstacle that we have, it's just speaking the same language. And what is that? Well, for many in the consumer end, those that are, because there's differences even within the consumer markets, but let's say the highly aware consumer markets, they see this as a way of pushing forward action to tackle the climate and the biodiversity crisis. And I think even though producer countries have agreed upon those principles, if you go into the producer spaces, it starts to be a conversation of how do you enhance livelihoods and how do you tackle poverty. There's no net zero without having zero poverty. So when we start to understand the conversation or the different languages of both ends and try to go to the middle point, we might have a lot of these solutions. But more important, coming back to your question, Pietro, is that this shows the interlinkages with the other agendas. And then how can we as countries and global citizens can shape the global agenda in such a way that we get win-wins, we get cost-effective approaches. Then deforestation becomes, tackling deforestation becomes an important piece of that global well-being approach that's being addressed.
This is Felipe Carazo, Head of Public Sector Engagement at the Tropical Forest Alliance at the World Economic Forum. Felipe, thank you so much for being here with us, providing your view and actually also telling us about your work at the Tropical Forest Alliance to tackle deforestation. And actually, as you said, going close to zero deforestation. A lot still needs to be done, but a lot has been done also thanks to the work you guys are doing. So thank you very much for being here with us at the Sustainable Nutrition Platform. Felipe, I will see you very soon again in one of our events, and hopefully I'll see you around in our attempt to solve some of the current global issues.